Welcome everyone to today's Halacha discussion. Today we begin the laws of Tzedaka, which are primarily found in Perek Lamed Daled, chapter 34 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Over there in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the author tells us, Rav Shlomo Gansfried tells us, that there is a mitzvat aseh, a positive commandment to give tzedakah. This is primarily based on the pasuk in Sefer Devarim Perek Tet Vav, pasuk Chet, Sefer Devarim, chapter 15, pasuk 8, which says, Ki fatoach tiftach et yadecha lo. You have to certainly open your hand to give a poor person who extends his hand and is asking for a handout. To such a person, there is an obligation to offer support. Furthermore, in Sefer Vayikra, Perek Chaf Hey, pasuk Lamed Vav, chapter 25, verse 36, it says, the Torah says, V'chei achicha imach, your brother shall live with you. This refers to our responsibility to support those, particularly our brothers, meaning those from our nation, but as we'll see later on, the mitzvah of tzedakah actually applies to all people, Jews and non-Jews. There is an obligation to support those in need. But this pasuk, B'chei achicha imach, this verse tells us that there is a responsibility, that there is an obligation to support those who have fallen on difficult times. Not only is there a positive mitzvah to go out and to give tzedakah to those in need, to give charity to those in need, but also a person who sees another individual in need and refuses to help them or tries to hide from helping them is actually in violation of a prohibition. This is learned from the pasuk Lo ta'ametz at levavecha v'lo tikpotz at yadecha me'achicha ha'avyon. Do not close your heart or shut your hand from your poor brother. And that is from the book of Devarim, chapter 15, pasuk verse 7, Perek Tet Vav, pasuk Zayin. So what we've established today is that there is both a positive commandment to give charity and a negative commandment or prohibition to avoid giving charity to those who are in need. The question that I'd like to finish off with today is, does this mean that there is an obligation to give charity to anyone who makes a request? Sometimes we encounter individuals and we're not sure if they're actually legitimate. Or furthermore, we may encounter individuals who could actually earn a living if they choose to. However, they choose not to and rather make themselves the burden on others. Is there a responsibility or a requirement to give charity to such individuals? Regarding this question, there are actually three different approaches. One approach is, and this is probably applicable most of the time, if one doesn't know whether the person asking for tzedakah could be employed, perhaps they could be, perhaps they can't be because of some sort of physical or mental limitation. If you're just not sure, then there is an obligation to give them at least a minimal amount of tzedakah. After all, if the person cannot earn a living on their own, if they're not capable of earning a living, then of course there is an obligation to help them. And later on in the laws of tzedakah, we will see, or we will discuss, I should say, the hierarchy of to whom one should give tzedakah first, or to whom our priorities in tzedakah should go to. However, in this particular case, where one encounters a person who may or may not be able to be self-sufficient, and we're not sure, there is most likely an obligation to give them, at least according to the first approach, we'll say there is an obligation to give them at least a minimal amount of charity. What happens if you encounter a person and it seems that like they are capable of being self-sufficient and yet they choose not to be? Regarding such an individual, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein of blessed memory, the late Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Har Etzion and of the Yeshiva University Grus Kollel in Jerusalem, is quoted as saying that if a person chooses to rely on the kindness of others, even though he could be working, there is still an obligation to give him something minimal so that we don't train ourselves to be cruel. It could be that there is no obligation to offer significant support to such an individual. After all, he chose to put himself in that situation where he is dependent upon the kindness of others, but nevertheless, it is not a positive thing for a person to train himself to be stingy with his money and to not generate kindness through the giving of charity. And therefore, it is recommended to give such an individual who chooses not to work, even though he could, at least a minimal amount of tzedakah. Rav Hershel Schachter of Yeshiva University is quoted as saying that there is no obligation to give charity to someone who you know for sure is capable of earning a living but chooses not to. And this is based on the comments of the commentary Kli Yakar to the Chumash, in which he points out that there's an obligation to assist a person in his financial needs. Assisting means helping a person who is already trying on his own and is failing to take care of his financial needs. However, if a person is not even trying on his own and he is deciding to make himself the recipient of the kindness of others, even though he could work on his own, so there is no responsibility to support such a person. Practically speaking, as they say in Hebrew, bashetach, in the field, when you're out there and you encounter individuals who ask for money, most of the time it's very difficult to verify whether they are capable of earning a living independently or not. And therefore, I would say it's recommended to give, if possible, a small amount of tzedakah to such individuals. If that's not feasible, of course, then it would seem that there's no obligation to offer significant support. But if one has small change available, it certainly would be appropriate to give small donation to individuals who ask for handouts if you are not sure, or even if you are sure, that they could be working and choose not to. Obviously, if you're certain that they cannot earn a living independently because of physical or mental limitations, then there is a much greater responsibility and obligation to support such individuals, and that should be taken very seriously. Have a wonderful day.